This is episode 1112.
The evolution of it was very different for departments. Some who was quite revolutionary. I think others who had used bots, right, and kind of were very elementary responses. It was more just, I think, an evolution of that. But I think we're pretty proactive once that technology came out to what are our rules? What's the policy? How do we make sure that our proprietary information doesn't get out there? Which had to happen for a few companies. So we created our own instance of we call it Z-GPT with one of the large providers, so that again we can put our proprietary information and leverage the tool without it being risked of going out in the public, right? So I can take our earnings call, and put it in the model and say, how would you summarize? What questions would someone ask if you would listen to this, earnings script?
Today we speak with Nathan Winters, CFO of Zebra Technologies, who shares how his leadership philosophy was shaped not just behind a desk, but on the factory floor, in operating meetings and alongside customers. For winners, the credibility finance brings to business starts with showing up, observing operations firsthand, and connecting financial insights to real-world challenges. Nathan also discusses how Zebra has navigated tariff pressures by diversifying its supply chains as we explore Zebra's evolution through AI adoption and digital transformation. One theme remains clear: finance creates the most value when it sees the front lines up close. Our talk with CFO Nathan Winters begins after this. Hello, today we welcome back Nathan Winters, now a seasoned CFO at Zebra Technologies. Since we last spoke with Nathan in 2021, just months into his CFO tenure, Nathan has continued to shape Zebra's financial strategy while navigating global market shifts, M&A, and technology transformation. You'll recall he has 17 years behind him at GE, and Nathan arrived at Zebra with a deep experience in global finance, supply chain leadership, and operational excellence. Nathan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Jack. It's great to be back after almost 4 years since the last time.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So during that 4 years, you've had a front row seat to Zebra's evolution as a CFO. Wondering if you wouldn't mind, you could walk us through some of the key milestones that you feel have defined that 4 years, your tenure really over that time.
I think the milestone or some of the things that defined it has been it's been a crazy world over the last 4 years. So back in 2021, it was coming out of COVID. I think when we talked, I had never met with my team in person at that point. So coming out of COVID, and for us as a company, we had incredible growth, which we could talk about a little bit later, as everything e-commerce, buy online, pick up in store, and all these new modes of how we buy as consumers. Our products and technology help with that. So we had this incredible growth coming out of COVID, followed by tremendous pressure on our supply chain, as many did, in terms of finding product and getting product, just as the world was trying to catch up coming out of COVID. And then 2023, we had a bit of a pause as a company, had to take some restructuring actions, and the last 18 months has been returning to growth and getting back to the fun part of growing the business. So I'd say it's been a fun ride over the last 4 years. Every year, every month's a little bit different, but that's what makes the job fun.
Can you tell us something about your team over that time, over that period? Did you add some new roles? Did you enlarge it? Is it rough, or maybe it's roughly the same size? It's not uncommon for it to be, finance teams don't grow all that much these days.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate that the finance teams largely stayed the same. We've had a couple folks opportunity to retire, and then been very fortunate that we had a great stable of talent to backfill those roles internally and join the leadership team. I think for me, the one thing that's been added since we talked back a couple of years ago, I picked up IT and cybersecurity for the organization. So, it's every finance leader's dream to one day own cybersecurity, which is one of the top risks for the company from from an external environment. But that's been an incredible opportunity for me to learn and grow and learn something new. And it's such an incredible, important topic in terms of protecting the company. But the core finance team has largely been the same, which has been really incredible to kind of for us to grow as a cohesive team over the last 4 years.
Can we ask you specifically about your FP&A people? Are you using them differently?
No, we have basically the same size team. I think one of the things the team's done an incredible job as technology's evolved of, how do you get smarter, provide better insights, use tools to have real-time dashboards so that, that they don't less time running reports, spending, in Excel spreadsheets and more time on modeling, different scenarios, drilling into the different parts of the business, supporting the business versus, running reports and doing that. I think that's been a continual evolution since I joined the company, but one that the team's really focused on, again, using the tools that are out there to be more efficient and help provide better insights and value to the company versus checking the box.
One of the interesting things that I recall about Zebra is that it's not just software. It's hardware, it's software, it's services. Can you share a little more about, what makes this company unique?
We like to say a lot of our products and solutions are hidden in plain sight, but you use them and you see them in everyday parts of your life. So it's whether you're checking out at the grocery store and using a scanner, the packages that are being delivered to your front doorstep and being notified that they were delivered, that's because of our technology, or the wristband that you get when you're checking into a hospital that can make sure that you're the right patient at the right time for the right care. Those are more likely a Zebra wristband. But I think if you look at the portfolio today, we like to say we're integral to intelligent operations. And what does that mean? That means we give assets and inventory a digital voice. And so, once you have that digital voice, then you can think about how do you optimize, drive efficiencies around all the various workflows that we stay in. So, for example, if I know where an inventory is throughout supply chain, I can interpret that data. Then you can understand how do you optimize that flow to be more efficient. If I have technology in the hands of a frontline worker, so think of a retail store associate or a warehouse worker, and you can provide information to them that's valuable real time, they can be more efficient, drive better productivity, but also have a better experience for their customer, right? I think, which we all want as a consumer. So again, we've expanded the portfolio into things like robotics, machine vision. So again, it's our job is how do we help customers solve their greatest challenges by digitizing and automating and driving the productivity they need to meet their customer demands.
As you mentioned to us, a lot of those frontline devices, mobile computers, barcode scanners, RFID readers, I think, and printers, are all part of the product mix at Zebra, which leads us to just navigating the more recent challenges posed by, tariffs. What would you tell us about? I'm sure there's been more than one meeting on this topic, and there have been a number of business headlines related to some of the discussion that you've had with your investors. What would you tell us about this?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work over the last 5 to 6 years to diversify our supply chain, diversifying outside of China. I mean, most of our production back 6 years ago was from China into North America. That's down to 30% today. So again, it wasn't just about tariffs. It's about having a diversified supply chain for resiliency and all the benefits that come from that. But we have a dedicated team that's works with our trading partners, works with to government side to understand from a policy what's happening, and then model out all the different scenarios as they're tweeted out, just so we can make sure we're pivoting in the right direction to understand the risk as well as what are the implications in terms of how we mitigate it. But some of this is trying to see through the noise and just execute our plan. And I think that's what the team's been focused on. But it's a lot of energy and effort. But I think we're well positioned to navigate through it here as we work through it.
We've been having this sort of tariff discussion with a number of finance leaders, and again, it changes. So it's nothing seems to be in stone necessarily, but it's an uncertain economic environment. How is that influencing your strategic planning and your investment decisions?
I'd say not a real impact, I'd say on the long-term strategic plan, right? I think the long-term, we know we want to have a diversified supply chain, that's, uses our manufacturing partners around the globe. And but on the short term, there is obviously an impact, right? In terms of, do we need to move production to country A, country B? Do you onshore it? And those are really tough decisions to make given the uncertainty. So I think for us, we'd like to see a policy certainty, whatever the outcome is. And then once you know that, you can plan around it. So I think it's obviously a challenge in the short term as you're trying to make trade-offs in those decisions, but I'd say it hasn't impacted our long-term strategy of where do we want to grow the business, where do we want to invest, how do we want to take care of our customers. But it's definitely a lot of work here in the short term in terms of trying to figure out the right best decision on some of these production moves.
I'm looking for a metric that over the last 4 years, maybe it was a metric that you didn't rely on 4 years ago, but you rely on it today. What's a metric that you've added to the mix that maybe it was already in the mix, but it plays a much larger role, or you draw the organization's attention to it over time and, made it more meaningful to more people across the organization? I don't know. We're looking for a metric that sort of has evolved and is playing a more important role today. What would come to mind?
As we've built some of the digital connections with our mobile computing platform, with some of our new offerings, we can now measure utilization of the assets, right? Obviously, our customers get that to know how they're utilizing it, but we see it as well. So we can help our customers with their asset utilization. Do they have too many devices, too few, battery life, right? Which is kind of a real value add when we think about the value we provide to our customers that we think is differentiated in the market that our customers obviously they value.
But at the same time, it gives you insight into, okay, who are the customers who are succeeding, and here are the ones that aren't. And look, it's showing that this particular customer is not in a good place right now because it resembles other customers.
If they're not getting value out of that, then they're more likely to not buy again or refresh, right? If they don't see the value. So sometimes you got to go tell them that it's there and the opportunities.
Yeah.
Just because they haven't looked or they haven't paid attention. So again, it's not making like anything. Are you getting value for what you paid for? And making sure that the customers see that. Kind of, I say the pure financial metrics that sounds, still if I was when some of the questions came through, it was to some extent, we're not looking at anything different, but I'd say much more intently given the macroeconomic uncertainty, right? So it's, it's not as if these are different metrics that we didn't have before, in terms of daily, weekly sales by vertical market. But knowing that there's this market uncertainty and risk from a macro perspective, being really thoughtful, are there cracks in the business? Or, and trying to get ahead of that, I say is probably where we're spending more time now. It's not necessarily new, but intentional and hyper-focused given the macro uncertainty.
We've also been talking to finance leaders, of course, about AI, and just talking about Zebra Technologies and sort of the frontline workers out there. How do you integrate AI into these types of products to improve their decision making? Those types of workers on the front line. What would you tell us?
Yeah, I think we think about it a couple ways. I'd say first, back to what we do at our core, which is even with the barcode scanners, we collect a lot of data, right? So every time you scan a product, wherever it's at, that's data that's being ingested that you can give to a large language model to analyze, interpret, and come up with, whatever the solution is you're looking for. So some of it is, somewhat foundational to the data that's being collected and used and analyzed. But the other one is we look at traditional AI, for example, in a robotics business, and how do you navigate a robot around a factory or a warehouse, without running into people and knowing what's the right next best path. That's using AI technology. Or in our machine vision business, optical character recognition. So as something's in a high speed going down a production line, taking an image, translating that and saying, is the label labeled correctly? Is the water filled up correctly? And doing that in milliseconds down a production line is all using AI tools. So other things like product recognition, package dimensioning. So there's a whole bunch of things, AI related tools embedded in our product. But the one I think we're really interested in, and we introduced some of this in January at the National Retail Federation trade show, so the big trade show for retail, which is how can AI transform the workflows for frontline workers. So we introduced Zebra Companion. I'll give you a couple examples to think about. So imagine you're a team member using a Zebra mobile computer and in a retail department, in a retail store. Historically, if you wanted to say, was that a shelf in front of you, was it the right product with the right label? Was something out of stock? Was the pricing done correctly? You would have had you visually do that and then manually do something to fix it. With AI, you can take a picture of the shelf, and then AI can generate a task to someone in the back of the store to replenish something that's out of stock. It may tell you, as the associate, move this product from here to here, or change the price on another given product because it's incorrect. So think about that manual task that had to be done with someone's kind of know-how. You can give someone this their first day on the job. All they have to do is take pictures of a shelf and automatically create the tasks that need to be done to have kind of a perfect shelf, if you will, in a retail store. Or accelerated training for a new store associate. We showed a couple of examples of, imagine you're a high schooler working in a retail, and you're having to walk down a break down the baby food aisle. And a mom stops you and says, "Hey, I'm looking at baby food. What's a good baby food for, my child who has an upset stomach?" And you're an 18-year-old. Well, now you can pull out your mobile device, ask, and promptly get it back with not only what's the best product, a picture of the product, the price of the product, what location it's at, and you can provide that service real time to that consumer, right? So, and then, or a simple thing like a return. How do you process a return without a receipt? You don't have to ask your manager or someone who's been there for 5 years. So it's all about making a store associate that's brand new capable as if they've been there for 4 or 5 years. And those are all, capabilities that AI introduces, and we're uniquely positioned to do that with the position we have with frontline workers to help our customers deliver that value to their associates.
Now, I want to talk to you maybe about generative AI and the arrival of ChatGPT. Can you tell us something? I mean, was this something rather novel for your workforce? I have to believe there were departments where suddenly you were being asked for dozens of licenses and what have you, and you had to come up with an approach as to how to allocate those extra, budget for those. Yeah. Or no? What would you tell us about the arrival of these LLMs?
Yeah, I'd say to your point, I think it was the evolution of it was very different for departments. Some who was quite revolutionary. I think others who had used bots, right, and kind of more very elementary responses. It was more just, I think, an evolution of that. But I think we're pretty proactive once that technology came out to what are our rules? What's the policy? How do we make sure that our proprietary information doesn't get out there? Which, had to happen for, a few companies. So we created our own instance we call it Z-GPT, with one of the large providers, so that, again, we can put our proprietary information and leverage the tool without it being risked of going out in the public, right? So I can take our earnings call, and put it in the model and say, how would you summarize? What questions would someone ask if you would listen to this, earnings script? So we can do that because we have it, self-contained. So again, I think it's some of those groups, like our call center, our technical support team. It's all about, I think, how do you just take the next step in advancing the tools they already had, where some of the folks, I think even in core finance, it was really trying to think outside the box on how do you do work differently. We've created some, and I'd say what we're doing as a company is piloting a lot, trying a lot of different things. Some of it will fail and not work. So for example, if you have a question on how to submit an expense report, you don't call anybody, you don't ask anybody, you go to a generative AI tool, ask, and you can get a response back kind of in a, normal language. And so we're trying all these different things internally that I think are pretty exciting. And then the other thing I'd say is, like a lot of companies, getting kind of co-pilot technologies out with our software developers. So how do you make software development, code development more efficient? So we launched that early this year, so it's early to tell on where we're at from a improvement. And the one thing I'd say, we're pretty excited about this from a sales perspective. We're now building, we launched just a couple months ago. If you're a seller and you have an account, before you may have to spend hours putting a presentation together. What's our marketing collateral? What's a white paper? What's the customer's use case? Background on the customer. Let's say you're new to the account. With a push of a button, you can get all that data. AI will collect all that data for you and put it in a presentation for you as a first pass. So again, just the efficiency you get. If now a seller, instead of spending 3-4 hours searching and hunting and looking at all these different folders, can have a presentation at their fingertips that then they just have to modify and improve. So that's what we're really excited about. It's pretty early on, and obviously a language model improves as you go, but there's a bunch of different things, I guess, we're learning and trying and piloting, and I think that's what makes it exciting and fun.
Regarding the automation of the finance operation, where is AI having the greatest impact? There's so many areas, but there's probably one area where it's really demonstrated or proved itself time and again.
Yeah, I'd say this is a bit more, I call it analytics versus AI. But we've spent a lot of time getting all of our data into one cloud data lake. So our ERP information, our marketing information, our supply chain information, information we get from our customers, we have about our customers. And once you have it all together, you can do really cool analysis like propensity to buy from a customer. So you can take an account, a customer, and go based on their characteristics, number of employees, revenue, the region of the world they live in, their area of focus that buys a lot of Zebra gear. And here's the exact same profile of a customer that buys nothing. And how do you go target those accounts, right, that have the same characteristics? Those are things we weren't able to do until we had all the data together using kind of advanced analytical tools to build that. Or when we're launching a new product, you can now be really smart about where do you target that product, given, in particular accounts that have the best characteristics to buy it. Now that we have all that data together. So that's one example. The one that we're piloting, it's still, I'd say early, is I call it generative business intelligence. So there's a lot of work done, right? Taking a manual Excel spreadsheet, putting it in a automated, dashboard. And we've done that over the time, but you still need someone to analyze it. Well, just imagine instead of looking at a trend of revenue, and now you can have a generative response that says revenue's grown X. Last week was a bit of a downtick. We're pacing behind or ahead of schedule. Kind of 4 or 5 key summary bullets that can be created using generative AI that a finance person was probably doing that before. And now that finance person can focus on, instead of writing a summary to their manager, interpreting kind of high level, spend more time going deeper and really trying to understand the root cause. So I'm pretty excited about generative BI as a way to kind of continue to move forward our how we give information out to the operating teams in a real and efficient way.
As we look forward, would you expect new responsibilities? Would you expect different skill sets? Help us understand, as you go forward, how is the mix of talents and skills likely to change for a finance team like the one you have?
Yeah. You know what? My guess is the answer will be pretty close to what maybe CFO said, 6, 7, 8 years ago when you're talking about how does mobility and some of those technologies change the finance function. I think it just continues from that, which is we're long from the days of a finance job is, run a report, download, submit a report. And, if you're not, you know, um, analyzing the information, thinking about it, being thoughtful, providing insights, challenging your business leader, finding new ways to think about things, I think you're getting passed up in your career, right? If you wake up and go, my job is to run this report, book this journal entry, close the books, that's all you think your role is. I think, those are what continues to get automated, each and every day. So you have to do that, but also you need to be a business partner, right? And help business leaders understand what's the next best thing to do, or, here's some interesting insights. And I think AI just only helps facilitate that and make that much more important. Because again, back to that early example, if giving insights is looking at a chart that's now automated and telling a business leader, here's 5 important things. If generative AI can do that, you're gonna have to go one step further. Not only here's 5 important things, but here's what you should do about it. Right? So I think it keeps us elevating what you need to bring to the table to continue to provide value as a finance function. So I think back to what we're doing is a lot of time on training around generative AI.
But you mentioned earlier that in the area of cybersecurity, I think you now oversee that realm. Tell us something about that. I mean, was that something you raised your hand for, or was it something that, was said, it looks like this could be in your reign, your realm, and you said, yeah, that makes sense. Why?
It's a good question. My predecessor, IT had reported to my predecessor before. It moved under another leader, partially because it was, I was new to the role, first time CFO. That other leader moved on, and so as their next change evolved, it just made a lot of sense to move back under finance. And my position was always, I don't care who it reports to from an IT perspective, because finance and IT have to work hand in hand. We own the budget, so to some extent they can report to whoever they want, because I'm still going to be intimately involved. And so it was it was very natural moving it, the IT organization back and keeping that with cyber. So we have two leaders, our CIO and our CISO, who both report to me. And I think part of it was making sure to have the attention and focus, making sure we were allocating the right dollars to it from an investment perspective, given the risk that's out there in the market. And the tie-in with IT made a lot of sense. And so, I think it was somewhat. I didn't raise my hand, but I didn't say no, because, like I said, I've learned a ton. It's been, I never thought I'd find myself at a CISO conference speaking. So, it's been incredibly.
Has that happened?
It has. Yeah. I haven't been invited back, so I'm not sure what that means. But what
was the topic du jour? Was it something you just?
It was the importance of cyber for management and leadership. So how does a executive leadership team look at cybersecurity? And again, we spend a lot of time with our audit committee, talking about what we do. So it made a natural fit there. So like I said, it's been not something you wake up in the morning thinking that's what you want to be responsible for, but I think it makes a ton of sense to be part of the finance organization. And we made a lot of progress, but it's one that I do spend a lot of time on, given the risks to the company and how that area has evolved. And it's such an important topic to make sure you're protecting the company.
Well, we are up to where we usually ask for a finance strategic moment. You might recall this is where we ask you to look back in time and share a moment of strategic insight that you experienced along the way. And again, It's where you saw an opportunity or maybe a risk, or we're just looking for a good story that reveals how finance plays a strategic role. What comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment for you?
I wouldn't say it was a moment. I was thinking back on this, but it was definitely, I'd say, an observation over time that came to a head when I was the supply chain leader at healthcare. And that was, I've always enjoyed getting out in the field, whether that's, visiting customers, visiting suppliers, obviously spending time with the team, walking the manufacturing floor. I've done that. I've had the opportunity of that since I was very early in my career, and I've just always enjoyed it. I joke with my wife, I get a little antsy if I'm behind my desk for too long. But I'd say the moment happened when I was leading the supply chain team, and the credibility you get by the operating leaders when they see you out in the field, I think is incredibly important, right? So if you're in a meeting and you're challenging them and you're having a tough discussion or you're giving recommendations, if you've never been out there with them, it's hard to have credibility around the topic. But when they see you walking around the plant, they see you involved in operating meetings, they see you visiting suppliers or customers or whatever it might be, it brings some real credibility to what you say, and that really came to light in that role. So what I tell my team is, look, you got to get out, right? If you're in sales finance, go visit customers. If you're in supply chain, go visit sites. And not every role has the ability to do that, but sometimes it's, as a finance, it's also just asking to go, right? There might be a meeting and, hey, can I get invited to that? And the operating leader may not think. I've never had anyone say no, right? And so I said, you got to just involve yourself and ask, but get in there, because again, I think you learn a lot. It helps you connect the dots between what you see in the financials to the operations, and the credibility is you can't really put a worth to that. So, anyways, that to me has been I'd say something I enjoyed doing, but really came to head in that moment with the supply chain team, which obviously is so important when you're out visiting what the operating team's doing.
Well, we always like to, before you go, we always like to ask you to look forward for us as well. And we're wondering what your priorities are for the coming 12 months as a CFO. What would those be?
I think the good news is we talked about most of them. So I think obviously navigating through the current changes in the trade environment, making sure we continue to deliver profitable growth coming out of it. And once we have clarity around the trade agreements, we'll make the necessary decisions and pivots that we need to from how we operate. I think the other is accelerating the adoption of AI across the company, right? Both from the tools we have from an IT perspective that our employees can leverage, but also where can we really transform how we do work to provide more value. And then the last one is what we just mentioned on IT and cybersecurity. It's something we don't take for granted. You have to stay diligent. You have to try to stay one step ahead of the bad guys, right? As we like to say. So I'd say those three top of mind. It's navigating the current environment, and then really how do we advance AI and make sure we continue to protect the company.
Nathan Winters, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Great. Thanks, Jack.